Here I'm going to go over pruning of cannabis, and while there may be different techniques, for the most part, in the end, the goal is the same, to kind of trim out the plant to make it more productive. So looking at plant pruning in general, it involves selectively removing portions of the plant with the goal to allow the plant to not only put its energy into parts that will produce its greatest yields. We want to cut off the ones that are just not going to produce well so it can focus its energy elsewhere. Different methods can result in different flowering times, so keep that in mind that if you are switching a pruning method, it could adjust your entire growth cycle and your flowering times. You want to be sure to clean your tools and wash them frequently to reduce the potential for cross-contamination as you move from plant to plant. If one plant does have an internal vascular disease, you don't want to have your tools be the transmission to go through and infect all the plants down that row. And also, while it can be fun to prune initially, and you kind of enjoy removing plant material, don't get prune happy and create what I call the Charlie Brown plant, where you look back at the plant and go, ooh, probably shouldn't have taken that much off it. So just keep that in mind also. The goal for pruning is you want to remove the weak branches. So this can be referred to as freshening up the plant. These poor yielding portions should be removed because they're hurting your yields overall, and they themselves are not going to produce all that well. Dead or dying leaves should be removed, it's like the one I pictured here, on a regular basis, again, to reduce the chance of disease, and that is technically a form of pruning. Be sure to discard these leaves away from the main crop, and by removing these leaves and weak branches in general, you can also increase the air circulation in your plant. These are all great benefits. Some people say, well, I'm not going to prune. What's the downfall if I just kind of let the plant grow and do its own thing? Well, this can increase plant density, which is advantageous in small spaces. It's most beneficial if your plants are growing under 3 feet tall in a short season. So there are options where you potentially can get away with not pruning, but it's not really the most efficient method. I should still take care to remove older leaves that are browning, as those could harbor disease or potential for insects. The downfall when you don't prune is you have this kind of situation that could develop, where you have poor air circulation. Many leaves will not get adequate light penetration. This could make them, reduce the productivity of the plant in general. Could also get into some cases here, we have the opposite, where if you don't prune, plants can get really leggy. You're not kind of pruning them to kind of take away the apical meristem to make them kind of grow outward a little bit more. So that's a potential another downfall, again, depending what cultivar or what plant stock you're using. It's also plant topping. This involves removal of the main shoot to create 2 strong growing shoots to develop. So removal of the apical dominant, or that main stalk, is advantageous because then you can have now a 2-liter system. This is common for poinsettias, and this is referred to as pinching the plant. This will remove the presence of a dense top bud, but overall yield will not be that negatively impacted because now you're going to have more buds growing off these branches. And the 4-liter system is kind of like what I just showed, just kind of you do it twice. Remove the top dominant apical meristem, allow for 4 main branches to grow. The goal here is to produce a large, dense bud at the flower tops. Training these newly developed 4 liters is needed to maximize the benefits of this pruning style. So again, this does require a little bit of a commitment throughout the season, and you got to kind of set your plant up early for this. Then there's the FIM Technique, and it stands for FIM. Instead of cleanly removing the top growth, I think I showed in the previous one, just below the bud, the traditional method, the bottom 10% of the bud is actually going to remain with this technique. This allows for different growing tops to form. You kind of see that it's evident here a little bit, a little zoomed in version here. This can induce the emergence of 8 or more branches. This is beneficial in producing many branches, especially if you're looking at cloning. It's often used with what's called the screen of green style of growing, but very common for cloning, simply because you have so many branch points. Now, everyone would say, well, how come we just don't want to have all these branch points all the time? Is this can have more branch points, correct, but it could potentially reduce total size of each of those buds. Then there's the bending of the plants, less stress on plants than pruning. Just as the name implies, the branches are bent to the ground and staked in place. This can be used to kind of jump plants around. It's called tip propagation, used with raspberries sometimes. This is not quite the full bending of plants technique, but gives you the idea of kind of setting that plant up potentially to go to that technique. However, it's more commonly done with plants as they get close to the light source with limited ceiling height. So if you have that one branch that's getting a little bit high, you kind of bend that branch over to keep it away from the light, but not lose anything on that particular side shoot. There's a sea of green, ScrOG, focuses on flowering plants early. can be done at 1 foot or about 30 centimeters tall with the goal of producing fewer but larger buds. We see kind of an example here. Commonly found in grow spaces that are growing at a high plant density. Then there's a screen of green, and this uses mesh or screen netting that's layered horizontally, you see here, above the plants, and the growing tips grow through that material. Typically, plants must remain in a vegetative state a little bit longer, several more weeks than the previous sea of green that I had mentioned. So again, this is an outdoor operation, a little bit better for this area, not quite as height limited, a little bit longer growing season. So again, you have to choose what fits your particular operation. There's something called lollipopping, and this is a technique that involves removing the lower growth of the plant that receives little to no light. You can see this down the whole grow facility. The goal is to have plants make the most use of the energy it produces by having it focus on the upper buds and branches. Timing of the photoperiod flip is based on cultivar and height for plants. Make the flips for indicas about 3–3.5 feet to provide more time for the vegetative state. And sativas, you typically want to flip maybe a little bit earlier there, almost sometimes half the height, since they can grow much taller during the flowering phase. This might be a little bit specific to the particular cultivars you are growing within the indicas or the sativa classification. Lastly, here we have supercropping. The goal is to produce very heavy yields with minimal number of plants. It's accomplished this by the plants that are held higher in the vegetative phase longer. Supercropping involves bending the upper branches. We see here this 90-degree angle occurs right here, down to allow for more light to reach deeper into the lower parts of the plant. By keeping the plant material away from the lights, this allows the extended vegetative phase with minimal leaf burn. And this is referred to as supercropping.